Hi everybody, it's Lydia Laucella. Today I'm talking to you about my Learning Opportunity Project. But before I get started and show you the lesson plan and some sample student work, I wanted to walk you through what this lesson is. I've actually already taught this lesson before as part of a first year seminar or college course, and it can be heavily modified for any age group or subject that you're teaching. I have modified this for this assignment based on some of the great feedback that I received. But what I really enjoy about this lesson is that it helps develop students' sense of agency and their social voice, and in this case talk about the importance of critical literacy. And it also shows how critical literacy happens in larger society. So what I've found is that students really enjoy doing this lesson, and it also elicits a lot of debate about some of these social issues. So you'll get some really healthy debate and sometimes some very strong opinions, which is great because it starts to develop some critical discourse. However, I would recommend putting this lesson into some kind of context before you teach it. So I would have taught a lesson about diversity beforehand. What does diversity mean? What are the primary and secondary dimensions of diversity? And how do our prejudice and biases affect our worldview? And after this lesson was taught, I would also kind of follow up with another lesson. For example, in my course, I would talk about global issues and how some of these social issues in the United States that we discussed can be applied to our understanding of larger global socioeconomic issues such as poverty, for example. So let me show you the lesson. So this is called Can We Affect Change? And it will begin by having students reflect on how their environment affects their worldview. So they will look at how parents, guardians, religious leaders, peers, teachers, and their community play a role in how they develop world perspective. They will look at a model that would help them understand this. And then they would do a reflective activity, a short discussion about how do they think that their upbringing affects their worldview. Were there ever times that they start to stray away from their foundations and explore different frames of mind? Then we would talk about developing critical literacy and its importance. We would talk about the definition, and after that, we would apply it to current social movements with the goal of affecting change. So they will take a look at 4 different social movements. The first one will be the Black Lives Matter movement. So they'll do a reading about it to get a better understanding of how it started, why it started. They'll take a look at their mission statement to get an idea of what is the social issue that they were trying to change or transform. The second social movement that they will take a look at is the Blue Lives Matter, which we know spun off of the Black Lives Matter movement. So they'll actually see the evolution, see maybe some feedback from the media about this particular movement. And then the third social movement that they'll take a look at is All Lives Matter, which again was spun out from the prior 2. So they'll take a look at the whole evolution of these 3 movements, do some research about it, and then look at a more recent movement. Even though it started in 2006, we know the Me Too movement recently in the last year or so has taken off and has gotten a lot of national conversation about it. After they do some research and we investigate these 4 movements, then the students will engage in a movement analysis. So we'll talk about what are these movements trying to accomplish, what social inequality do they recognize in these movements, how are these movements trying to fix it, and they'll take a look at their mission statements, visions, and goals and determine whether they thought they were effective. And then finally, they'll get to their own assignment. So they would choose a pivotal issue in America. So any social issue that they are passionate about, such as gun control, abortion, environmental change, etc. And usually at this stage for college students, they have a passion about a certain subject. So it's really not that hard for them to develop or choose their issue. But if you're working with some younger students like middle school or high school students, they might not have that awareness yet. So you might want to coax them into finding a topic that would be appropriate for them and for their age group. Groups will work in 3 to 5 students to create their own social movement. They should have an online brochure or a mock website that includes the following: their mission statement, their goal as a movement, and their platform. So what do they stand for and why? What is their target population? What are their growth tactics as a movement? What is their prediction for success and any obstacles that they predict could hold them back? They would include an active social media hashtag, and they would also be asked to introduce our topic on social media. However, I know some students might not be completely comfortable with that. So you could ask them to include it as part of a course. But I have had some students in the past that have actually wanted to run with it, and they want to spread the news on campus about this movement. So it's really up to your student what is their comfort level. And then finally, they should create an original symbol, so not plagiarize symbols from other movements. And with all of this, they will create a 5-minute presentation that talks about their movement. They could create a PowerPoint, a Prezi, or a video, brochures, business cards, that kind of sells their movement to other students. And this is a time where students have the opportunity to discuss after the end of each presentation, what were some of their reactions. And this is when a good debate starts to happen typically. And then at the end of all of the presentations, students will participate in a whole group discussion to reflect on their experience and their understanding of critical literacy. So things that we would want to discuss is how has this activity changed the way you think about certain social issues? What did you learn from fellow students? Were there any times that you maybe agreed or disagreed about students' social stance? And how did this activity transform any of your opinions about some of these social issues? I've also included an assignment timeline to help you determine how this should look. So day one, they would choose their issue and research it. So you don't want them just to go in blind. They should research the issue and see if there are any similar movements associated with this issue that they could learn from. Day two, they would work solely on creating their movement, and they should do that during the remainder of the class, and any extra work would be done outside of class. They should definitely be encouraged to practice their presentation. In day three, they would present and discuss, and also be aware that they could be answering some questions from other students. And then again, at the end, we would discuss the activity. I've also included a rubric for students and for you guys to view, so you could see this could definitely be modified, made more specific, but just to let them know that what is required from them. So now I'd like to show you an actual sample. I mentioned earlier that I have taught this before. I have not included all of the digital components of having them included online and create a digital presence with this. So this looks a little bit different than yours probably would, but I think it was a really good example of how students explored a social issue that was really important in the national conversation back in 2016. So this group looked, they created the hashtag Pink and Blue Thinking. And it's interesting to see how their location, their environment actually affected their opinion about this stance. Since they were students taking classes at a STEM-focused campus, it ended up translating a little bit into their interpretation of the issue. So here you can see why they created the movement. So they talked about their mission statement, their goal, their target population, growth tactics, prediction for success, and any reasons why they might not be successful. Then they introduced students to some research on the issue. So they talked about socialization manipulation, they talked about harmful femininity, and they talked about toxic masculinity. So they looked at the issue from both sides. Then they started to go into, again, what I talked about, STEM fields. So why are there not as many girls in the STEM fields? So they included some really good research about that. And then they sparked a really good debate in class about how students feel about these two images. So they showed these two images to class, and we had a good discussion about that. And then they kind of transferred the conversation into what do different gender roles look like? What does it look like to be transgender? So they started to discuss a little bit more in depth about how this is translated in society. And then they just included some other facts at the end of their slideshow and concluded, again, with their symbol. And you could see what's very interesting about the symbol that they created is they kind of created a broken link. So their symbol was very symbolic of their movement. So I hope this all was very helpful to you, and you learned a lot from this lesson. Again, this can be made, modified into any lesson for any age group. And I've had a lot of fun doing it, and I've learned a lot from this assignment. I did not actually teach it this semester, but I know next semester I will, with these added digital components, with all this great feedback that I got. So I'm really excited for it next year. Please take a look at the lesson. I have in my assignment, I have the actual lesson plan, the sample student work, and my learning objectives and all that good stuff. So I hope you enjoyed this. Good luck on your presentations, and I'll see you soon. Take care.